quick review. I'm gonna do a review of the game now that the game is over. Let's see. I'm gonna also go ahead and knock down the volume while I do that. And so I'll have this play in the background while we're waiting. Let's see. So anyway, with the reviews, normally wow, I'm actually blanking for a second. No. So normally when I do these reviews, I usually do it this way. So usually I check the story, I think about the graphics, the sound, and the gameplay, and then at the very end I just say how I felt, whether or not the game is worth playing, right? And so let's see. Oh, someone's sending me like the Sony conference link. I'll probably watch it a little later. It's okay. I don't need to catch it live. It's not a big deal. Anyway, so let's get started first. So, well, anyway, because this is an RPG, it was a very long one, and it also was lengthened by the fact that all the encounters were a lot longer. So it took us a while to get through it. The problem is that because the difficulty was so high, battles took a lot longer, and it made it so that our game time probably was artificially length. It probably would have been a lot we probably would have lost a good chunk of time if we had just played on a lower difficulty. So I mean, it is what it is, right? So let's first start with the story. So one nice thing to be honest, on the story isn't the deepest or the darkest or the most complicated thing ever. I mean, it's just the actual story is very simple. It's more like a lot of incidents happened, and these incidents happened because the Shadow Dragon came from the world of Fire Emblem into the real world, and all the Mirages are coming here because the Shadow Dragon is trying to harvest Performa, or sorry, not the Shadow Dragon, because Garneth was trying to harvest all the Performa to re-summon the Shadow Dragon here, and have a place so that the Shadow Dragon could thrive, because he was just like, I don't care, I just want to destroy everything. And that's kind of how the story began, because the Mirages started attacking roughly around when Tsubasa and Itsuki were kids. So, and that's why Ayaha went missing for a very long time. I mean, that's it. The story is pretty simple, and honestly, a lot of the plot isn't very complicated, and most of it is just very. It's actually, the chapters are actually pretty episodic. Well, they don't really. They're kind of connected, but it's more like you find out a new piece of information, but the immediate conflict is not directly related to another one. So it was interesting they chose this format of each chapter focuses on a new victim each time, and then eventually after a certain one, you find out about a very near the end, you just found out, you just kept getting pieces of a dragon stone, and it allowed you to remember exactly what was causing it. The other thing is oh, Hatanaka-san, he's the bad guy. I'm okay, that's kind of interesting. The villain's motivation, Hatanaka was I didn't really why he wanted to be so evil. I don't really understand, but they don't really dwell on it too long, and so he just kind of gets discarded really fast. So you never really see him as manipulating the shadows. He's more of just an observer watching around. Though I guess you could have suspected something was up when he was wandering a dungeon. He was totally fine. The other thing is Garneth is evil. It's very much in character with Fire Emblem, the original Fire Emblem, which is where the Shadow Dragon, Garneth, and Marth, Shida, let's see, Navarre and Drog come from. The other characters Chrom and Salia come from Awakening, and of course Virion as well. So it's interesting they use the world of Awakening takes place in the same timeline as Fire Emblem. So I mean, but I think the stronger parts are actually doing the side quests to learn more about the characters. If you had just done the main story, you wouldn't know anything about anybody. But the game kind of encourages you to do so, because every time you actually play the levels, it's actually really nice. They give you an incentive hey, if you did the side story, you can make your character stronger. But not only that, you could get to know them a bit better. And I actually really appreciate that. like it gives you a nice incentive. And frankly, on and especially on hard mode difficulty, you need everything to help you in your quest. You need, as you can see when we struggled through the playthrough, you needed every single ammo you need. Every single ammo was necessary to fight, so you had a huge incentive to go into side stories and learn more about the characters. Some of the side stories are, like, Yashiro's are generally pretty good. Like, there's maybe one that's kind of ridiculous, but for the most part, I actually really liked his side stories. Mamori's is nice too. Like, I don't want to go into summarizing details, but it's like, yeah, Yashiro's has really good side stories because they're more like about him struggling with his father, and it kind of comes to a head when he meets, like, he gets his chance to like prove himself to his father, and that was actually pretty cool. LA's is alright, but it is, I guess, like, a lot of it is, they touch on some issues like Kiria is like struggling with her own identity and how she doesn't want to be like this kind of experience traumatized her as a kid, and so she's kind of she's struggled against it for a very long time. And like that's kind of like there's a lot of this stuff that is not, they don't go too deeply into it, so it's kind of a little bit more of the light version, but at least they bring it up to, like, Ellie even says like, yeah, I'm a hafu, and the people treat me different because I am, because of the fact that I'm like, oh, I look different than everyone else. And that was like, they kind of touched upon it. And so even Toma, like, he's trying to get his his way up in the tokusatsu world, and that is kind of cool too. I think a lot of it is like, yeah, those are like, some of them are really entertaining and really funny, but like generally it's nice to get a feel for the characters, and even if they're not the most like, oh, they're the most realistically written, or like their progression isn't like, oh my goodness, like this is like, wow, this is really real, but at the very least everyone's pleasant enough, and you get a little bit of depth, and like there's a little bit there's depth, and there's a little bit of stuff that kind of surprises you. So the thing is, like, I wouldn't say this is my favorite RPG story at all, and like we certainly don't cover a lot of topics in great depth like other games like Ari and Legacy of the Koryodan, or even Persona 5, which I won't elaborate on here, but overall, like, it's like, if you just like don't take it too seriously, and you just like accept that it's a little bit on the absurd side, then you have a lot of fun. And just don't go in expecting like a very realistic portrayal of the idol industry, because in reality, like, the idol industry is I mean, it's not sunshine and rainbows in here, but in the real world, it's certainly not sunshine and rainbows, and some really messed up stuff happens, and like overworking and like working conditions. So they kind of, that's the only thing I like, they don't really bring that up, that fact that like a lot of these people in the entertainment industry work super hard, and like it can burn you out really badly. But I guess like Fortuna is kind of a nice place. Like Michael-san is also like works really hard, but I guess they try to give everyone a nice work-life balance, so it's a good place. And overall, it's fine. It's good enough. It's not particularly sad, not particularly like deep. I mean, Ayaha was kind of a nice thing too. Like, we're glad we saved her sister, and it is true that at least there's like, you have to deal with some of like the like Yashiro and his dad. That was pretty. That's a bit more of one of the stronger parts of the side story. So yeah, overall, it's alright. It's not bad. Just don't, if you're not expecting too much, you'll be fine. Yeah, you don't play this game for the story most of all. So anyway, let me go ahead and go to the graphics while we're talking about it. The graphics are pretty, I don't know, I don't want to say they're a bit more than serviceable. Like, they're pretty nice actually. Like, I certainly don't have a feeling of like, oh, this is aged poorly, or like all the models look kind of terrible. Like, the expressions are a little bit exaggerated at times, but I did appreciate the fact that like they had a lot of attention. Like, you could tell that they really tried to make the best out of like the power of the Wii U, which is like not, the Wii U is not that powerful of a system, but It's it's good enough. It runs good enough and everything. Some of the dungeons look pretty nice actually, so I didn't notice like, oh, this is like really really bad. The models are really ugly or whatever. And so the models are pretty nice, and and like I didn't feel at any point that I'm like, oh, this is really aged, even though it's not the most like technically realistic graphics I've ever seen, but at the very least, like for the style they're going for and like some of the choices they made with like making the non-important NPCs like just like silhouettes. I actually like at first I thought like, oh, that's really weird, but it's actually I actually appreciate that because the graphics also make it so that it's much easier to find who you need to talk to. So the thing is like they wanted to present the city as like, oh, this is Tokyo, so there's a ton of people, but at the same time, if you have a ton of people, you don't know who to talk to, and sometimes that can get in the way of like the gameplay experience where you're trying to find someone. But at least they're like, oh no, the silhouettes, I don't have to worry about them. And then I was like, I appreciate that. I appreciate them using limitations and turning them into ways to make the game's design better. And so I appreciate that a lot. Other than that, the animation quality is actually I actually like, oh, actually it's competently animated. I'm very surprised. Like I think they use real like actual like animation studios. I think Studio Dean with Trigger was one of them. I was looking at the credits, so those are pretty nice. The only thing I'll mention this really quickly. The only thing is like, it is silly that they decided to censor so much of the game. And like honestly, like if you look at some of the stuff they censored, it's just like, it's a little bit mind-boggling, and I don't know why. I don't know, they were so concerned they would get an M rating that they did that, and I think it was overkill. So, and it's kind of weird, and so it's just kind of unfortunate that it turned out that way. Like I don't honestly, like based on what I've played, I don't think that would have impacted my enjoyment all that much. I guess like, oh great, we just don't see swimsuits. From what I like, that's the most infamous one. There's no swimsuits, but like I'm not like I'm like, it's not that important, but it's just unfortunate. And it's unfortunate that they had to censor the game, and so I guess that's incentive to play the Japanese version at some point. You can actually see what you miss, but I don't think you miss too much. So otherwise, with the graphics, I don't have anything else to say. There's a few weird costumes that act a little weird, interact little weirdly with the battle. During battle, but other than that, like, no, they're actually it actually looks pretty good. For this game actually looks pretty nice. The UI is nice too, and like it's easy to read, which is really good, useful, and it's colorful, and like they tried really hard to make it seem like an idol themed game where everything's bright, and so like the theming is very, very like it just sets the tone for this game. So the other thing to mention is that if you notice that and this is kind of connected to story as well. Sorry, I'm jumping a little over the place. I just remembered this game is actually like influenced by Shin Megami Tensei. Like the spells come from Shin Megami Tensei and SMT, which is for Atlus's other property. I do think that it is unfortunate that this game, like the game has a lot of didn't have too much of the SMT feeling to it. I mean, we have the spells and and maybe like a Jack Frost and a Black Frost reference, but we actually didn't get that much SMT in this game. It's just kind of unfortunate. And I actually thought they would have more, or maybe they would have brought more of the monsters that SMT is known for into the game. But I guess we did not do that. A lot of the monsters are completely made for this game. So I guess that's both good and bad. Let's see. Let me go now. Let's move on to sound. So one thing is like the music is really important. Yeah, I'm still here. What, did you just finish the conference? Oh, the conference just ended? That's fine. I was gonna watch it later anyway. So I'm doing the review because like I also have to I want to end this stream earlier rather than later. I didn't want to stop the review for it. Let's see. So I'm going to talk about the sound of the game. So this is really important because this game is all about music. Tons and tons of music. So the battle themes are pretty nice. I don't know if they're the most memorable I've ever heard. But, like, I've definitely heard I definitely appreciated, like, the battle themes. Some of the dungeon themes are pretty good. Some of them kind of were grating after a while. But, you know, that's just the way it goes with these kind of things. Let's see, anything... But, like, let's see. So, but most of all, like, a lot of the stuff you'll hear is from Avex, like, the actual, like, pop songs. And some of them are actually really neat. Like, I was actually really impressed. I'm like, wow, this actually sounds production quality. So, if you want some good pop songs, this is the way to go. I feel like there's one for every, like, popular genre in Japan at the time this game was made, or which is like last year. So you'll hear the pop sound, hear something that's a little more like the ballads, which is more Mamori. You'll hear something that sounds like a Johnny Entertainment song, pop song, which is from Yashiro. And even Itsuki songs are really like, even like the little few songs that Itsuki gets to sing are like, he gets to sing one song, and at least that's pretty nice. It's a nice, happy song. Anyway, Kiria's more of that cool sound, which is more endemic of like a solo singer in Japan. It does sound a bit more like the Ani song, which is what her voice actress is known for, incidentally, for Flipside, that band. So it is pretty cool to hear like the songs in there, and like that's kind of the highlight of the game, is like enjoying the song, enjoying the pop, and having fun. There isn't much else to say. The sound effects are like fine. They are serviceable. They serve the game's purpose. The voice acting is certainly like, it feels like an anime. It's totally anime voice acting. Like there's not any like really like, everyone sounds like unique and like excited for the role. And of course Barry is still hilarious to listen to, because the voice actor had to like fake mispronouncing Japanese over and over again. I guess the only thing I could ding the game is more like, I feel for anyone who wanted to play this game in English, the most difficult part is that if you didn't understand Japanese, a lot of the battle quotes and a lot of battle quotes don't have translations, so you had to, if you didn't understand it, you were just basically boned. If you can't understand Japanese, you just like, I don't know any of the battle quotes. So basically, if you notice during the stream, I had to translate a lot of the battle quotes over and over again just to kind of help you guys out. But even my Japanese isn't amazing, so I was just basing it off like what I could understand. But I do think it's unfortunate because like most players are not like me who have some listening skills in Japanese. If you had no listening skill in Japanese, you were basically like, I don't know what the heck they're saying. So I have to ding the game for that, because like they should, if they were going to insist on keeping the game in its original Japanese format, they should have put more. There were times there they needed to translate more, and I feel like that's just that's an unfortunate shame. And I guess like I could ding it for having no dub, but I guess it'd be kind of weird, huh? Because all the songs would still be in Japanese, and then the voice actors would change between English and Japanese. I always thought that was very strange. Like even like productions like Love Live or have that same issue where like they'll have English voice acting, and then there'll still be a Japanese songs with completely different voice actresses. As it's a little bit jarring. So I don't know. I don't know if there was a good medium for it. Probably subs are probably the easiest thing they could do. And I have to say, speaking of the translation in this game is really good. Like they tried to make everyone have their own speaking format, and that was really nice. Like after having played okay, this might go into a little bit. I'm gonna touch a little bit on like the comparison between this game and Persona 5's translation. The thing is, like, I feel like this game is more competently translated, or like it's much easier to determine who's talking based on the text, which is kind of like how you're supposed to do it. But because in Persona 5 there's some issues with like the text being a bit dry at times, but at least in this game you don't have that issue because the translation is very good for this game. I was listening and I was like, oh, it's on point. I can't really say anything bad about it. So props to the translators. Good job. A competently translated game. Let's see. So finally we come to the real thing we've all been waiting for. The gameplay. Honestly, the gameplay is probably the best part of this game. Like, a lot of it, one thing I really appreciate this game for, like, the game, it's so fun to play. If it weren't, I would have been complaining the whole time. But, like, there's just, like, the way the game is set up is, like, even on hard mode, which is painful, and, like, you saw the pain directly, we witnessed it. The pain, even though there's a lot of difficulty, the game doesn't punish you for... The game punishes you, but it's very fair. So, what I mean is that when you play the... One thing is that you can save anywhere. That is so good. That is so useful. Because now as a player, you're not punished. You can't lose... You basically never lose progress. Because you always keep your levels and your EXP. Because if you save after every battle, then you're in great shape. And you can save anytime. You can escape the dungeon at any time with a very, very cheap spell. So you're given all the tools you need to succeed. So in essence, like, you also, if you've noticed, getting money in this game is very, very easy. So oftentimes, like, after like a certain point in the game, I no longer had to worry about money. And so you could buy all the equipment and the items you needed. But the thing is, the game is so well tuned that even with all, like, even in the hard mode, even with all the items and resources you have at your disposal, you're still going to be presented a challenge. So every every difficult battle and boss is done in such a way that, like, you have the possibility to win even with all your resources. You can still have, I guess, like, you can still lose even with your resources because they limit how many items you can carry of each time. So you can't just carry the most overpowered weapon items all the time. So that was, like, they tuned it so that the game player would still face a challenge, but you never feel like, oh, I can't succeed because of some arbitrary, like, lack of money. And, like, a lot of the fun is, like, when you get the dual arts, you can start, like, there's these things that make the battles exciting because I'm like, oh shoot, I got, like, an SP attack, or oh shoot, I got this dual art that I can choose from. And those were really fun to do. And at first I was going to complain that you couldn't skip the animations, but later on I found out that you could. So that's kind of nice to know. I do wish they probably could have tutorialized it a little more, where they made it, like, obvious that, like, hey, you know, are you tired of seeing the same animation? You can use B button to skip it. I didn't know that for most of the game, so I'm actually kind of like, I feel that that's kind of a misstep. But it's not a major one, but it would certainly have saved a lot of time. But, like, the dual arts make things lots of fun. And the session system is also really nice because you're like, oh, I need to, like, I want to get as many sessions as possible. And, like, you'll want to fight, you want to train your people to eventually get the skill where, like, hey, you can join in on a session even if you're not in there. And it's really cool. So it's very satisfying to just see how you do. And it's nice to see, like, the turn order. You have ample time to prepare. So it's a turn-based game, so you don't really need reflexes. So you're given all the tools you need to succeed from the controls, and so on and so forth. The other thing is, like, I guess hitting an enemy is pretty easy to do. There were a few times where they kind of swarmed you. And at least the nice thing is, even if you run into, like, a savage enemy, you're not screwed because you can just use escape. And you should usually buy, you had the opportunity to buy lots of items to mitigate any bad encounters you run into. What else I was gonna say? I guess the also nice thing they had was that they put a lot of, like, extra stuff on the side. Like, the posters are really satisfying to collect because they remind you of your memories of the game as you played it, and you're like, oh, I remember that event. I remember when we did this side quest. I remember when we did the main quest. I got all of them. I was actually that motivated because it's actually fairly easy to get mail marks. The other thing I want to say was, I also like the fact that through the gameplay, Oh yeah, too bad you can't put up the posters anywhere. I agree. That was too bad, wasn't it? I also like the fact that you're motivated to do the side quests in order to power up the people. Oh, yeah, I know. Well, that's kind of cool, too. For me, I'm not as much of an interior decorator because I'm quite lazy. I'm quite lazy to do that kind of stuff, but I guess I should appreciate if they put it in for you. The other thing I want to mention is that I like the fact that the social links, sorry. They're called side quests in this game. Doing the side quests are totally worth it for the most part because, like, one, as I said earlier, you get to learn about the character too, but that also feeds back into the main game because if you power up your characters, they can do even stronger attacks, or sometimes even the most absurd, silly attacks or dual arts. And but that all of that helps you succeed in the game in battle, which is the meat of the story, meat of the gameplay. I think the only thing I can say is that some of the one or two of the dungeons were kind of annoying. Like, for the most part, most of the dungeons are pretty, like, okay, you can kind of figure your way out. But I wasn't a big of a fan of, like, some of the dungeon where you had to basically try a bunch of doors and hope you made it through. It's kind of, that was a little bit annoyance. And the one you have to memorize numbers, like, I'm not really a big fan of that dungeon in particular. It's the one with Tarachino in it. And that was, like, that was really, really annoying. Some of the dungeons are kind of like, oh, geez, they're very confusing. They're not the worst dungeons I've ever faced in my in my playthrough of RPGs, for sure. But they did take some time to, like, get used to, and I was like, oh, geez, I'm getting a little confused. But overall, like, I had fun. Like, the game was fun to play, which really is, like, a huge deal. And I like and it's also very, like, nice that, like, even though the bosses are really hard, you never feel like you don't have the resources to do it. That's what I feel makes the game worth playing, for sure, 100%. Alright, so that means, like, we come to some finishing thoughts. So, if I were, would I recommend this to for someone to play? I guess it really depends. So for me personally, I would say this is like, you get this game is long enough to get the thumbs up buy. You might even have fun doing a new game plus. So thumbs up buy for me, like, totally worth owning and totally worth playing. Like, I feel like the way the system works is, like, even if you can get through, like, the anime-ish story, you should be fine. I think maybe it'd be a thumbs up rent for someone who is, like, I don't want to say open-minded, but who's not as forgiving about, like, these kind of things, like, who are not used to anime in general, or who may be, like, turned off by the art style because I guess it's a little bit of a personal taste kind of deal, or, like, how the silly conflicts. Like, if you wanted something, like, dark and gritty, they're not the game for you, because, like, even though it shares a lot of stuff from Shin Megami Tensei, it is certainly not anywhere near dark in this game. Like, only, like, there's only some, maybe near the end, but that's pretty not too terrifying. I guess the world ending was pretty crazy, but it's never a Shin Megami Tensei game without the world ending, right? And this game is no exception. Fortunately, we were able to stave it off. Oh yes, and if you want something dark and gritty, that would actually be more for a main line Shin Megami Tensei game, but we won't talk about that. Well, I'll just bring it up that if you're someone expecting that in this game, this is not the game for that. You will not see that in this game. So that's maybe a thumbs up rent. Maybe you're like, if you're kind of open-minded and you're just fine with playing something, if you want to play something a bit different than your standard RPG, especially in setting and characters, then this is the way for you. If you don't like RPGs, you'll probably get mired in the fact that the systems is a turn-based system, so you don't have direct control of the action. And for some people, that's enough of a turn-off, so maybe this is not for you if you are in that category. Otherwise, for most people, I'd say give it a try. Or get the game if you can. If you have a Wii U, this is one of the few RPGs on the Wii U that is, and it's probably and so, like, yeah, thumbs up buy. I really liked it. I enjoyed my experience. That's why I played the game so long. That's why I did all the side quests. I was super motivated to play the game. So Thank you, Nintendo and Atlas, for working on this game. It's a very interesting project and certainly not what I was expecting. And I had lower expectations going in, but I'm very happy that they exceeded my expectations. I think the only thing I wanted to say was, yeah, I guess that's it for the review. I think that's it. I mean, I think we covered all the aspects of the game. So, right, it is more on the idealistic side, right? There's nothing wrong with a bit more happiness. I mean, I think a lot of, like, let me think about what I was going to say, yeah. Because there's a lot of RPGs where, like, oh, everything's so serious and gritty. Or, like, some people think RPGs that do take itself way, way too seriously, even... And so the writing doesn't quite make it there. But at least this game kind of understands that, like, hey, you know, this is, like, for fun. And, like, we'll still touch a bit on, like, actual issues in the entertainment industry. But it's not in a form that's, like, will drag you down too much. But it is like there is enough drama in this. It's just like an entertaining anime. So yeah, I say thumbs up by from me. You'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy it. If it's your first RPG, maybe you might want to hold up on this one and try something a little bit shorter. The only thing is, like, the game is certainly very long. There is a lot of stuff to go through. It's not as long as some of other RPGs, but it is certainly not no slouch in the length department. Anyway, so yeah, that's it for the review. I wanted to, and yeah, it would be sad to say goodbye to this game too. I've been on this game for so long, so anyway, we're reaching the 4-hour mark, so I'm gonna start wrapping up. So that means Tokyo Mirage Sessions is done. This is the probably the last Wii U RPG that we'll ever play on this stream, because there isn't any other ones that I'm aware of. Yeah, the Wii U unfortunately didn't get a ton of RPGs from Japan, or the West for that matter. It's unfortunate. So we played Xenoblade Chronicles X and Tokyo Mirage Sessions. So the only other RPG that will be on the Wii that we'll play is probably from the Virtual Console. So look out for that. It is possible I might do Earthbound Beginnings, but I haven't decided when to slot that in. However, enough about that.